Hey guys, it's your boy Progress, and welcome to a brand new video. If you want to go and follow me or contact me on my other social media, I've got my Twitter and Instagram on screen right now, so if you want, then you can go check those out. But yeah, let's get into today's video. Now I know I normally would cover rappers or other pop-styled artists, but it turns out that one of the most controversial events in music history actually happened over where you'd least expect it. Country music. And today I am going to discuss that event. That being when the American country singer Garth Brooks, the largest musician in US history and the second largest artist worldwide, only beaten by the Beatles, had rebranded into his alter ego of an Australian rock artist named Chris Gaines in 1999. Which 2019 just actually happens to be the 20-year anniversary of this event happening, so it's just a lucky coincidence. First, I want to put this all into perspective for you guys so you can truly have a grasp of understanding how insane this was when it happened. Garth Brooks in the time of his career, which still goes on to this day, has sold over 170 million records worldwide. Right now, we're on the weaker end of his career though, as his biggest parts were mainly before the 2000s. But the incident that I'm going to be talking about today is actually credited as being one of the incidents that could have caused the downfall of Garth Brooks. I mean, you can even see that the last album that he put out before the incident in 99 sold US Diamond, which is 10 million copies. But then the next real album that he ended up putting out, it only ended up selling about half of the copies and went from the previous album having an average of 15th on the charts worldwide to the album that came out afterwards only having an average of 34th worldwide. So yeah, this is gonna be a bit of a wild one with a few twists, so I hope you're ready. First, I'm gonna give you guys the short form version of what the public was told happened, then I will get into my more skeptical side of poking out the holes in the story, and finally I will present a well-researched theory as to what I actually think was going on here. So we start off September 28th of 1999, when the album was released, being called Garth Brooks in the life of Chris Gaines, or as it was sold other places worldwide as just Chris Gaines' greatest hits. The album was presented as being the greatest hits of Chris Gaines over the span of his 15-year-long, non-existent career. None of the songs on the album were actually written by Garth himself, they all had writers, but he was the one who performed them all. Later on, a mockumentary, that I will expand on in a little bit, would be released for the VH1 channel on the show Behind the Music, that would further detail into who Chris Gaines was and where he got his start in music. The mockumentary was extremely detailed and listed about as many events as you could possibly imagine, even going as far as showcasing his fake mother, fake managers, but also did star real musicians and journalists to make it that much more convincing. And for those of you who don't know what a mockumentary is, it's this as listed. Quote, a motion picture or television program that takes the form of a serious documentary in order to satirize its subject. Examples of this would be stuff such as Parks and Recreation, The Office, Modern Family, or even movies like Borat. It should also be noted that the Chris Gaines character specifically was not created by Garth Brooks himself, but rather by Paramount. People would soon start reading into things and finding out that Chris Gaines was not a real person, and it was in fact Garth Brooks, the country singer. This made a lot of people very upset. Just try to imagine that your favorite artist just up and went and decided to start making music for a genre that you don't like under a name that you've never heard before. Like if somebody like Scarlord decided to change his name to Bobby Jones and just start making folk music when he hasn't released a real album in 2 years, you'd probably be a little upset as well. Some would also read into it even more and find out that this Chris Gaines character was for a movie called The Lamb. And the Greatest Hits album was supposed to be the pre-soundtrack to the movie, and the mockumentary was going to be the introduction and backstory of the character Chris Gaines that they were going to expand on later. But after months and then years of people waiting, the movie never came out. which you may think is strange, so let me lay down a few of the holes in the story that was presented. This pre-soundtrack that was released as the album was supposedly out a year before the movie was supposed to even come out in the first place. That's an awful long time to try and keep people hyped for, especially when some had no idea that this was supposed to be for a movie where Garth Brooks would play the character Chris Gaines, because, as I mentioned, some people actually had albums that they bought that just said Chris Gaines' greatest hits, where there was no mention of Garth Brooks or The Lamb anywhere. The only thing that you could go off of was a little piece on the side that said pre-soundtrack, but even if you had that, some people may have not read it or not even known what it meant, and did pretty terrible in comparisons of sales that Garth Brooks would normally get, getting only 1/5 of the sales that his previous album got. It should be noted though that a lot of these albums were sold at a much cheaper cost because the stores had to try and just get rid of them because of how poorly they were selling. Also, to make things worse, if you remember, I said that I wanted to expand on the mockumentary, and that's because it was made nearly impossible for people to know that it was fake. Not just in the way that other mockumentaries are, where they come out and you find out afterwards that they're actually a mockumentary, or that they're a TV mockumentary, and then you find out through watching episodes of that exact show that it's all supposed to be satire. No, they didn't do that. They decided to put this on VH1, which was a massive music channel at the time. They also decided to put it on the show Behind the Music, which had previous bands and artists such as Lynyrd Skynyrd, Bon Jovi, Metallica, and Guns N' Roses, and so many more have real documentaries on there. So how was anyone supposed to understand that this was all fake for a movie setup? The only way that you would have actually found out that this was not real was if you had sat to the end of the 43-minute long documentary and read the credits of quickly scrolling by, seeing that it mentions that Garth Brooks plays Chris Gaines, and if you had waited even longer, you may have been able to see a very fast scrolling thing that I had to pause that just basically says that it's all fake, which when this was released on TV, you couldn't just pause TV. So there would have been absolutely no way for you to have read that fast enough, and let's be honest, by the time the credits were rolling, most people were probably changing the channel. But even still, there was no mention that this was for the build-up of a movie called The Lamb. As you can see, this should be starting to make you question things, such as if this movie was actually ever going to come out, then why was it that a full fake album and fake documentary were created and released, yet at no point was there even something as small as a poster for the movie or even a movie trailer that would have hinted at this being real? Especially with the claim that the album came out a year prior to the movie, so you would expect at some point a trailer would have had to have been shown. And also, why would Garth Brooks be casted to play as an Australian rock artist who has longer black hair over his eyes, makeup, and the 90s grunge style when he is known for being the honest country boy with a cowboy hat? And he especially was not known for any ability to act, which would also make it more strange as to why the artist ended up being chosen to be Australian, because on top of him having no acting experience, he also does not have any accent acting experience to be able to say why he would be a good fit for the role. Which really makes you wonder, did this movie ever exist? And I'm not the only one who's skeptical that this movie never existed, seeing as articles dating back to 1999 also make the skepticism claims that this may have not ever actually been coming out. So now that I've covered the original story and found the holes in it, let me explain to you what I think actually was going on here. It all seems like this was done as an elaborate way by the label to make Garth Brooks be able to rebrand as a rock artist. So maybe they teamed up with Paramount so that they could get them to make a backstory for a new character he would play. Now you may be asking, why in the world would Garth Brooks decide that at the height of his career, he would just drop everything and make a new persona? Well, it appears the answer may have been in front of us for a very long time. As Stereogum points out in their article titled "Party Off, Garth," The Short Life and Long Death of Chris Gaines. They say that as early as 1991, Garth was already starting to make moves and different types of music that styled more towards the rock genre and trying to move himself out from what the Nashville scene wanted him to be, with him slowly adding in more and more rock elements as each album came out. But as time was leading on into the late 90s, the superstar fame that Garth Brooks had achieved was clearly taking a toll on his mental health, as he even went as far to start referring to himself in the third person in interviews and when being talked to, as if Garth was a different person from himself. Stereogum also go on to theorize that this may have been just enough for Garth to try and fully break away from country because of all the expectations that came with being Garth Brooks, and they quote a man named Bruce Feller who made the first ever book on Garth Brooks, and on the matter of Chris Gaines, he said, quote, "He's showing his controlled schizophrenia to the world. It's exactly what I was talking about in the book, that there are two Garths in the early 90s. When I first started writing that he had a dark side and was fascinated by early death, it was considered so out there. Look at the lyrics to The Dance, to If Tomorrow Never Comes, or The Beaches of Cheney. Now it's basically coming true. Here's Chris Gaines, a guy who gets killed off and is resurrected by Garth. This is the inner recesses of Garth's imagination, and a lot of fans are scared about it." End quote. Something else that I also found while researching for this video is that in 1999, rock was actually hitting a spike in popularity, as well as some of the most chart-topping songs of any genre that year, which would then be the perfect time to jump into it, and why Capitol Records, the label that Garth Brooks was signed to at the time, allowed this all to be carried out. Because even though it should have sounded absolutely insane to them, all they could probably see was the dollar signs. Aside from all the personal stuff going on in Garth Brooks' life at the time that would show why the Chris Gaines character would be made, there's also things that happened during the time of the Chris Gaines character's run that also show that this could be true. Such as the aforementioned versions of the album that was just titled Chris Gaines' Greatest Hits, with absolutely no mention of Garth Brooks or the movie The Lamb. If they were trying to get samples for how the album would do, they may have tried doing different versions of it. One being that people know that it's actually Garth Brooks playing as a character but doing rock music, and the other one not mentioning Garth Brooks at all, hoping that people would just review it and judge it based on its merit of quality, rather than it being that it was made by Garth Brooks. Also, another thing that points to the focus of this being the music and not a movie was the fact that the movie was announced with the pre-soundtrack's release, and rather than the announcement having a bunch of movie posters behind it, no, instead it was just pictures of the album. So it very much seems like this was all a test done to see if Garth Brooks truly could ever do rock. And as time has shown, no. No, he couldn't. After this incident, Garth Brooks' sales actually slowly started to decline. And not only that, but in 2000, he would end up filing for divorce with his wife because he was cheating on her. And on top of that, in 2001, he would then finally retire from music for a few years to try and get everything in his life back together. Meaning that the backlash that he got from trying to hide into this new character of being Chris Gaines was just the little domino that pushed everything else over. But yeah, whether you want to believe that a movie starring Garth Brooks as an Aussie rock artist was ever going to come out, or if he truly did this as a way to try and escape the fame by making an alternate persona, one thing is for sure. He needs to fire his advisors. All of them need to be gone. They are horrible. The fact that no one stepped in and said how outrageous of an idea this was just goes to show how much the music industry is willing to do just to make a little bit more money, even if it could ruin a man's career. It's really just not fair, because when you look at it, Garth Brooks was just not in a good mental state at the time to be having these types of things, especially for Capitol to present him with the idea of getting to play an alternative person in the real world when he already is starting to disassociate. It just makes it look so bad. But yeah, that seems like it's going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys all did enjoy, because I know I definitely had a great time researching for this video, and shout out to my dad for actually bringing this up in a conversation, because if it weren't for that, I would have never known that this had happened or wanted to research it. So yeah. Also, massive thank you to all of my patrons, and special shout out to the $10 and up patrons of this month, those being Scrubby, Tozier, Medusa Lives, Tex, Marshall Milano, Mercedes Mayfield, Pithos, and Farski. You guys are all amazing. Thank you so much for your support. All your donations help me so much with being able to do stuff like pay for the video editor that I use and being able to upgrade my equipment so that I can make better content for the channel. So once again, thank you legends so much. If you do want to make a donation on Patreon, you can find the links to that in the description below. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Also, just a quick note that I wanted to add, I will be coming out with music sometime-ish in the future. I have been working on it, so if any of you care about that, then there's that to look forward to. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.
I got highs, I got lows. Don't be disrespecting, cause you know I met my goals. Told me lies, nickels, gold, but I'm catching on and I don't like what I've been told. See, bringing some shit up and then you say you like the old me. Back when nobody cared to even bring up the homie. Skate around my questions, you got cold feet, that's OB. And then they act like they don't even know me. That's all beef. Stand for a second, that's a